I do think it would probably get overtaken sooner than that.
Within 5 to 7.
Interesting. I mean, that feels very soon to me. 5 years. I mean, that's basically the next bull run. If we're in the same cycle,
Yeah,
I really struggle to.
Let's open a market then on Polymarket and make this official. Welcome to Unlayered, the show where we explore next-gen blockchains. I'm your host, Saul, alongside my co-host, Dave. And today is a more informal episode. We've done these a few times, roundtable-style discussion. Our guest is longtime ally, Bread, goes by 0xBreadGuy on Twitter, one of our earliest listeners, and has now emerged as quite the thought leader, crypto Twitter. And one of the topics, Bread, I've seen you talk a lot about that I think is super relevant to conversations we've had on this show, conversations I've had on other podcasts, is this relationship between L1s and L2s. And this is probably most relevant to ETH, but I think it applies to other chains as well. There's a lot of misinformation out there, and perhaps I'm part of the problem. You know, are L2s bad for L1s? Are they actually good? There's been debates even recently on other shows where people take either side of this dynamic. But yeah, I mean, let's start with that. What is the deal with L2s? Are they going to kill Ethereum? Are they going to save Ethereum? I really have no idea at this point.
Yeah. So thanks for having me on again. This is round 2, so I'm feeling pretty blessed to be able to come and debut. All right. So the conversation can get kind of murky because there's a bunch of different vectors people could take it, right? So like, oh, is this the proper way to scale? Oh, is this the way to like where's value accrual, whatever. But I think ultimately is like, ETH price go down. People don't like ETH price go down. Is reason price go down because this is the method of scaling. So like, there's a lot to unpack there. And where I've hyper focused on, because like we talk about scaling often, I'm sure you guys do all the time, and it's recognizing that all chains have a capacity, whether it's a gajillion, badillion, or it's 10 TPS per second, whatever, or measured by gas, however you want to do throughput. Everything has a limit, and all these systems, most of these systems are permissionless. So L2s can be built, right? They can be built on all of them, and there's nothing any given blockchain can stop. So like L2s will come everywhere. And you see, like, I've been pushing back pretty hardly against, because I guess there's the parasitic label, but I don't think the parasitic label is a structural thing with L2s. I think the parasitic thing becomes a reality whenever it is an explicit messaging fumble by a settlement layer blockchain. And what I mean by that is like, if you have a 100% overlap on these chains in user applications, I know Kaz Samani pointed this out a lot, like, you have Aave on every single L2 and Ethereum, right? So Aave on Base is because Base has built up the trust, and because Ethereum Foundation is straight up pushing users to L2 saying, we're not going to do anything here. There is no home for you on L1. Go play on Base. Because of that combination, now that one user who was going to do Aave transactions, whether it's super high value or it's super low value or whatever, is doing that on Base. And when you're losing execution, which we're starting to see is like kind of where a lot of the value is, you maintain the user relationship where a lot of the value is. And all of that goes to a different blockchain because they are different blockchains, right? Like it's hard to have, and then you put in a buffer of like, maybe that blockchain has a token. It's hard to see value accrual from all of that stuff going through the actual blockchain, through the native token this blockchain might have, and then also coming back down to Ethereum, because 99% of the actual economic value is captured at the L2 level. L2 flips a coin back to ETH and says, thanks for the user, thanks for the execution, thanks for whatever. And like you get 1/1000th of the user economic contribution back down to ETH instead of 1, right? A solid 1. And we're seeing that right now. We don't have enough users to balance pushing everyone to the L2s, and for Ethereum, frankly, to hold up all the narratives that it's been propped up by, which is like the ultrasound money and like the high fees and like all this shit. So there's a lot there, but that's kind of where I've been pushing that. They're not inherently parasitic. They're just parasitic whenever the messaging is fumbled and everyone is pushed to no longer use the settlement layer. You need users. You need fees. Blockchains literally need users and fees, and we're not getting them in aggregate from L2s right now.
But is it fair to say, and I think you probably said this already on various tweets, but the wrong way to look at Ethereum is ultrasound money? Like, can we move on from that, or is there still credence to that thesis?
Yeah, I mean, like, so there's two elements of it. Like, one is it sustainable. Two is it like the mimetic value of it, right? Because like ultimately there's humans buying this stuff, and Ethereum or chains, depending if you think economic security is a meme, like that does derive security from the value of the token. And if the token, like artificial scarcity is kind of propped up across all of this entire industry, right? It was birthed in Bitcoin with a 21 million cap. Like, doesn't have to be 21 million. They arbitrarily picked that because they think artificial, or this, well, it is artificial, scarcity is a value prop, right? And because of that, it gives them confidence to buy the thing, price go up, all that shit. So like, is it required? No. You probably need, if they want it to be a money, probably needs a little bit of inflation, needs to have velocity, needs to be whatever. But is it good mimetically? And does it drive price valuation, which ultimately, adds security to the network? Yeah, probably a little bit. So does it need it? Like, is Ethereum going to die? No, that's just all hyperbolic, whatever. Like, it's going to be fine. Is it going to maintain the number one or number two asset, across smart contract platforms for the next 5 years? It does have a game to lose there.
I often think when you start hearing about ETH, people talking about monetary premium, it kind of sounds to me like maybe it's because they've given up on it actually being able to accrue real value. And so that they have to sort of fall back on really something which is in Bitcoin's heartland. That is what Bitcoin is. It is the special Snowflake. And it's going to be very, very, very difficult for another asset to become money. And I think it's going to be very difficult to have money as like the core underscoring of what the value that is being created. So, when we're talking about L2s being parasitic and taking a lot of this money away from the L1, I think a large part of the problem is the L1's just not doing enough. It's just not doing enough on the L1. And I think that has been a misstep for a long while from the ETH developers, because Justin Drake was on Bankless, I think like 6 months ago. And he said then that all users should go to L2s, no users should remain on the L1. And I just think we're unfortunately seeing,
because it stood out so heavily to me.
Yeah, me too. It's something I've remembered because it just seems bizarre to me that you think it can accrue and be worth trillions of dollars if you're not having really very much activity going on. So, yeah.
Well, that's what's left, right? You have settlement, you have data availability, you're losing execution, right? And I'm starting to believe that the data availability is commodity-like. Like, I think people are over-indexing on how premium Ethereum. I know you had commented on one of my tweets, Dave, right? Like, I think people over-index on how awesome Ethereum's block space's data availability is, and how shrewd L2s will be in cutting their bottom line down, because they are a business and they have almost a fiduciary duty to be like mindful of the money that they spend to make sure that they can prop up and their ecosystem is safe and whatever. So like, and if Ethereum's, because it hasn't scaled, as you pointed out, and its data availability, these blobs that were implemented in Denkun, if those things are more expensive than the next 5 alternative data availability layers, like there's no requirement for that blob to be posted to Ethereum right next to the smart contract, which it literally isn't, because it's on the consensus layer, not the execution layer. The contract couldn't even call to it if it wanted to. So if the next 5 alt DAs are available cheaper than Ethereum, why wouldn't a business say, okay, I'll just do those other 5? Like, yeah, maybe one of them fails, maybe 4 of them fails, but redundancy builds out all the security that Ethereum is potentially giving me with its blob space. So like, I'm starting to like watch incentives and see like how, these guys are going to maximize profits. Why wouldn't they maximize profits?
Yeah. And I think incentives is the word, because you've got to think who's going to care if there's like an additional trust assumption on the DA. And obviously, yes, there is an additional trust assumption. We shouldn't be encouraging that in crypto. But at the end of the day, if it's going to make it orders of magnitude cheaper, the users are not going to be the ones to care. They're just not going to care. Like, we've seen it time and time and time again. They'll go to the most centralized chain in the world if they think that can make them money. And then the devs who are the ones really who should care about the security properties, they're going to go where the users are. So like, it is difficult, and like, it's super important in crypto that we do maintain stringent levels of decentralization and security, because otherwise you're just going to end up on people on hyper-centralized chains. So it's sort of down to both the users and developers to avoid that. But I think if we're just talking about fairly small security trust assumptions between these different DAs, but some of them are going to be orders of magnitude cheaper, it's very hard to see how.
Yeah, you just detailed that little chart that I've been throwing around. It's like, it's just 3 little points. It's like devs care, right? Because I think they're like, there's cyberpunk, whatever they want the values, they have all this stuff. Devs find out users don't care. Devs don't care. Like that's the waterfall every time. It's like we care, find out we're over indexing. We don't like, we're giving too much energy to this and it'd save us money. Okay, cool. We no longer care. Like that's the flow you're going to continue to see happen.
I think we already saw it happen with previous cycles. Some of the most popular ecosystems were in L2s, but they were kind of ETH adjacent, like Polygon, Avalanche, C-Chain. Now the talk of the town's projects like Monad, right, where they benefit from devs can be lazy and just uses essentially the same code. Maybe some modifications are needed. Deploy the same smart contracts, save a lot of time, have all the same access to the infra. But the chain itself doesn't really care about ETH. I mean, at that point, it has no economic relationship to ETH. And so to me, that's always been the question is like, why would someone choose to build on like a true L2 versus something that's just generally in the EVM world that gets like 95% of the benefit of an L2? Like we've already established this social kind of norm where people aren't, at least from what I understand, you know, the risk of, I guess, a double spend just doesn't seem as high as maybe it did 10 years ago, right? There's already just so much money in these systems. I feel like it's kind of infeasible to do that. And so the security guarantees that one would get from using ETH as a DA layer seems like it's overblown. I mean, is that a fair assumption to make, or is there some other reason why we should use a true L2?
Yeah. I mean, if we're talking purely about DA, like I've actually been meaning to like draw up a chart for this just to like try to bring to light like what it's actually used for. And I still think it's such a nebulous thing and people don't really understand like what's actually being done with that information. The only thing you're risking by putting it on an alt-DA versus Ethereum is that the other thing will be attacked, right? Or withhold information and won't be made available to you, right? So like and then like, so you want the nodes of the L2 to be able to query this stuff and get the data, like to represent the data, make it available to you. And if you straight up have L3s using the like off-chain stuff, right? The AWS, like all the proof of play, all of that stuff is off-chain DA. So, and users love it. They're playing Pirate Nation and they're doing like, it's fucking great. They're touting all these throughput metrics. So like, whenever people realize that like, there's no really inherent blockchain stuff that goes on with this other than like, it just serves up the data like IPFS, like basically anything else. Like, do you need that on a blockchain? Like, yeah, sure. Do you need that on the maximally decentralized, ultimately like secure, whatever thing? Maybe not. Like, yes, it sounds cute to say like everything's like defended by Ethereum and the likelihood of Ethereum being attacked is pretty fucking low because of everything else. But like, do you need to put it like in the fucking vault that's guarded by the million people to do the whatever so that if you, because like, there's that. And then like now you think about the instance and where you want to like, you actually need to query this information to like actually make sure like as a user, right? So like there are people that are sitting there checking this information when batches are posted to make sure that there wasn't an invalid state transition, whatever. But me as a user, until like the moment happens that I'm impacted, like someone stole something from me, something did something from me, and then I need to query this information, which is I would wager is not going to happen in my crypto journey. None of us are going to have to like have this instance where something happens. Then we go, now we need to go find this data. Like that, it's never going to happen. So you need a failure of the DA to serve it up. You need an attack on the actual L2 to happen. You need all those things to happen simultaneously. So like the attack happened when the other network also got attacked and like wasn't able to serve up the data. Like for all those things to be the confluence of events that happen to like actually make this stuff necessary, I think we're probably overdoing it a little bit. And like, I bet L2s will make that same assumption that like, yeah, sure, we can just throw it in a few places, make sure it's there. Cool. We'll store it ourselves. Awesome. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
And to put numbers on this, I mean, Justin Drake went on a podcast recently and his belief is that DA is going to form 99% of transaction fees in the future and MEV will be 1%. That's where he thinks it's going because we'll be able to reduce MEV and things like that. And so he believes that on ETH L1, it will be able to process 10 million TPS, 10 million transactions per second with existing hardware. Obviously, I'm not as smart as Justin Drake, so I'm not going to, argue on whether that is achievable or not. But I mean, he's talking then about it'll be about 1/10 of a cent per transaction, 10 million transactions per second. And that's enough for every human being on the world to do like 100,000 transactions every single day. But I mean, if you do the maths, it's averaging to like people need to spend $100 to $1,000 every single day just on ETH DA, when there's going to be lots of alternative DA options, and you've got to pay for execution, got to do all the L2 payments. I mean, it's just, and that's the bull case. That is the ETH bull case from the core devs. To me, I find it mind-boggling that is their route to creating, huge revenues.
Did you see the article I wrote up about the jostling of posting times down to the mainnet and how they're avoiding as blobs got expensive? Yeah, just to like dig into a little bit for listeners, it's like the thesis was, or not thesis, but the summarization of the article was, like, remember the relationship between these L2s and the L1 is pretty one-sided, right? It's basically L1 is at the behest of these L2s, and like they can sacrifice and maneuver and do whatever they can until the reputation is harmed, until someone calls it up. And what I mean by this is like, right, so envision it like the posting times down to Ethereum. These L2s arbitrarily decide how often they need to batch transactions down to L1, right? So it's constantly pinging, say once every 7 blocks, once every 10 blocks, once every block if you're based, once every 150 blocks if you're Linea, right? So like they send this message down to Ethereum to ping it, like just get their state down there, however often they want. And with that, they also send the blobs arbitrarily, right? They can do it, 2 per transaction, 5 per transaction, whatever. And they know that their fees are high, under certain conditions, right? They know if they do 3 or more blobs in a certain block, the next block is going to be more expensive. They know that if they do like rapid succession, fees are going to start spiking because they know how the mechanism works. So in the past, specifically around the Arbitrum airdrop for ZRO, layer 0, right? Everyone came in on Arbitrum. Arbitrum had a shitload of transactions. Had to get compressed into a bunch of blobs. Arbitrum didn't really have a process for like whatever, so they're just spamming blobs into the blob space, right? The blob space has a similar mechanism to 1559, which means like once you're over the limit, which is 3 per block, goes up like 12% the next block. And then it actually raises exponentially from there. So Arbitrum early on in the days, like, all right, cool, we'll just start firing these blobs. And they did this. And in all the other L2s that are rollups shared that same blob space, also posting their stuff because they weren't monitoring the space. They were just kind of like, yeah, automated, just throw in their normal cadence, normal whenever. They saw that, or at least because of Arbitrum specifically eating up all this blob space, prices went through the fucking roof, right? It rapidly accelerated from basically nothing to like whatever because it wasn't intelligent. None of these things were intelligent. They were just firing it into the blob space and paying whatever it asked. And when that happened, all the other L2s watched the blob space, started paying out their ass, and said, oh God, now we need to like avoid this instance, right? So they said, okay, we're either going to stop posting altogether, which some did. Scroll just straight up turned it off. They said, okay, done, we're done. We're waiting for fees to come down. Others, like based rollups, Tycho specifically, which are, because it's based, it has to post every block. Has to. Like that's the entire thing. Like it degrades user experience because the L1 is its sequencer. Even they, who like, if they slow down, change, do whatever, the users on L2 don't get confirmations. Even they said, all right, we're going to slow down. Like they stopped posting batches from every 2 blocks to every, like, I think they increased like 30-40% to like every like 2.5 blocks, whatever. Right. So all these L2s began to like change their behaviors and say, okay, we no longer want to pay high fees. And then because it's on their own, like, inclination to when and how often they pay this shit, they just like, some just said, all right, we won't pay it. We just, yes, Ethereum, you want to charge us more money? We're just not going to do it. Stop. That was Scroll. Some said, okay, we'll span out our stuff. Others said, we'll just like slow down our cadence from like whatever, 20% to whatever. So they started avoiding each other and spanning out these blobs, being intelligent with how they posted to bring the fees down to 0 again, which it did. And then everything resumed operation, which that showed us like, and now since then, Optimism, OP Stack, has implemented, or they're going to implement in their next code update, an intelligent switch from once blob data gets sufficiently expensive, it automatically switches over to going to call data. So they're going to do that to cool that market, crowd out the regular block space, and do it because it's cheaper for them. And then once that gets saturated, right, they can just stop again. Like they can do that. So like we're seeing that these L2s will coordinate with each other. They will avoid posting. They will do things. They will automate things. They will make it intelligent to avoid a high fee environment for themselves because they're businesses. Of course, they'll do that. Like they should do that. That's smart for them. And then like Ethereum doesn't get shit, right? So like they maximize their stuff. Half of those, unless they're a base rollup, don't even degrade the user experience. Users have no fucking idea, and they get to save money. Like win, 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 win. And Ethereum doesn't make money. Like that's the thing. Yeah.
Is there any argument to be made that just the fact that this is ETH adjacent will somehow make ETH valuable? Like you mentioned earlier, psychologically people just might buy it because it's like some sort of broad basket exposure to EVM chains, or does that, I don't know. That's the only kind of bull case I can think of here.
Yeah, I mean, some will, right? So like, but it's like, how much will it catch, right? Like some people still have ETH exposure because they don't understand all the L2 stuff. But like, I'm starting to lean towards like, if any one trader has bullishness on a particular ecosystem, right? If Base takes off, Base is crushing. I don't necessarily want ETH exposure for Base. I want like OP exposure because it's closer. If with Base as a token, I want Base token exposure to have to express bullishness on Base, not Ethereum. Ethereum maybe is too broad basket. I don't want Base plus 97 other rollups. I want Base, right? Base is the one that's eating the world. We're seeing power law take place in this L2 landscape where Base, Arbitrum, and the top 5 are eating up 95% of all users, transactions, fees, whatever. And like, why? Yep. Yeah. So yes, it will. How much? Like, yeah,
it's unclear.
Yeah.
Actually, let's talk about that. That's a good point you brought up. How would you describe? Say you're speaking to a developer. What are like the 3, maybe 5 only L2s they should think about building on?
Oh man. Developers want users, right? And I think ultimately
they want users and money.
They want users and money. I've built apps. Like it fucking sucks to build it in a hollow, dead ecosystem. Like you feel like you're doing crazy stuff. So like, if we're talking, yes, L2 specifically, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yes. So, this is for an L2. I mean, I don't know, just ETH adjacent. I think generally L2s is probably what you would advise them to do. I don't know. I mean, this is kind of open ended.
Yeah. I mean, like if it's something that is user facing, right? If it's like a high end consumer app, you obviously can't do mainnet, right? So like it's out of the question. 1, because it didn't scale, and 2, because like culture there just doesn't support that. So like, and the roadmap is not going to scale fast enough to like support that. So okay, so if you're high volume and you're user facing, you're going L2 for sure. Within the L2 ecosystem, then you literally just like you flip it by TVL and you crawl down that. I mean, it's hard to argue with the distribution effects of Coinbase. I'm starting to learn that distribution matters above more than basically everything in this space, right? So, and now you have Base talking about, like they're talking about pumping their throughput every week for the next, 40 weeks until they get to 1 gig of gas or whatever their thing is, right? So like they're really pushing the scale. I would say it's a little more on the timeline than say like Arbitrum. Arbitrum's kind of always surprised me because like, it's there, it's got high DeFi activity, but it's not really screamed about on CT. It's just kind of there. And then Blast is probably the other one that's also, it's kind of a counter trade because it's still OP-ish. It uses OP stack, but it's not in the super chain. And then, but it's, faded by.
It feels to me that Blast has had its day. It feels to me it's sort of come and gone, and I'm really struggling to imagine. And, it's coming off the back of the popularity of an NFT marketplace, which is also completely dying a death. So I'm really struggling. For me, I would go Mega ETH if you're going to go something outside of Base, basically.
If we can open up to uncapped, then not even live, Mega ETH is the one that's got me excited for sure.
More so than Monet.
I mean, we're talking L2 specifically, if we're talking,
I don't know what to call it. So it is a true L2, or is it like a thing that makes L2s faster as well? Like what is
Mega ETH?
Yeah.
So I like them because they're enabled because they are an L2. Now, when I say L2, like right? Everyone gets in these nerd fights over the buckets. There's a roll-up, which is like it posts both the proof and the data availability both go to Ethereum, right? That's a roll-up, that's Base, that's Arbitrum, that's OP mainnet, whatever, okay? And then there's Validiums and Optimiums, which means the proof, the small little bitty thing that goes down to mainnet is to Ethereum, and then the data is sent elsewhere, usually to Celestia or EigenDA, whatever. And that's what MegaETH does. MegaETH sends their proof down to Ethereum so that they get the security. That's what allows you to do like the escape hatch shit, right? To like, if everything goes sideways, I want to be able to just get my ETH out. You can do that, forced inclusion. And then the proof goes, or the data availability batch of transaction goes elsewhere. And MegaETH specifically sends that to EigenDA. And they do that. So like they have that's the structure. And then typical beyond that, the more nerdy shit is like Base, whatever. They all have one giant box that does all this shit, right? They have the sequencer. And what MegaETH did was that, okay, like we're just going to break the sequencer off into a bunch of components. So you have like the prover, you have the sequencer, you have all these different specialized nodes. And the combination of these specialized nodes doing the same thing that Base is doing with the single sequencer, because it's split up, is more efficient. And you no longer have to get consensus, right? It's a single sequencer doing this thing with all these specialized nodes. Because they do that, they can maximize the throughput and crank it up, as opposed to just having one big box do it that is trying to do a bunch of different things.
Gotcha. Just circling back real quick, because we talked about what developers should build on. So you're saying MegaETH is your pick for things that are released in the future. If gun to your head today, you're building an end user consumer application. I have DeFi Llama pulled up just out of curiosity. So the highest ranked L2, and I'm inventing this metric, but I'm calling it just a relevancy score. It's just kind of a blend of TVL addresses and DEX volumes. And so highest ranked one, it's either Base or Arbitrum at 4 or 5. They kind of are neck and neck, depending on which metrics you weigh more. Then it's pretty much, that's it. Those are the only two. In my view, I think Blast is 9 in TVL and it doesn't rank at all. It's 14 on volume. So I kind of we'll toss that one out. I think those are the only two actual L2s that have any meaningful adoption. The rest at the top 5 are Ethereum, which we threw out because you can't really build on it. It's too expensive. Solana, BSC, Tron, depending on what metrics matter to you. That's kind of it. So it's really interesting to see, maybe not a fall
It's
from
that power
grace,
law, right? People want the composable state or the atomic composability, right?
That's always been something I've come back to, is the only successful smart contract blockchains have been ones with a unified single state. And that's basically Ethereum and Solana.
It's appealing.
Yeah, exactly. It's the only thing that's ever worked. We want to be able to build on top of other protocols to, ship things quickly. And that, I think that's part of the reason why L2s are struggling. Just on MegaETH though, one thing I do really like about it, and this sort of relates to a Kyle Samani quote where he basically says that L2s aren't parasitic if they're doing more than can be done on the L1. And that's obviously tricky with ETH because basically, exactly, where it's a bit more additive, symbiotic. Obviously, that's difficult with ETH because the L1 is, very low throughput. But I think something like MegaETH, it really is going to produce an experience that even on a slightly more beefed up ETH L1, you just simply can't produce. And likewise on Solana, I think Zeta is one of the perp dexes, but they're about to launch a layer 2 and they're going to be doing latency down at like 5 milliseconds, I think. So it'll be faster than you get on Binance. So I think, low latency is another gain which you can get from layer 2s. I think that's entirely valid because obviously if you're on a decentralized L1 blockchain, you're having to go between all of the nodes. And as Totally often says, you're limited by the laws of physics to about 200 milliseconds. So, if it's additive, and I definitely think MegaETH is, then it makes a lot more sense to me. But I think the problem where ETH has gone is by obviously not scaling the L1 and actually recent discussions from Max Resnick on podcast where he is now starting to try and push this. And to be honest, it's the first time I've felt slightly bullish about Ethereum in a long, long time. I'm not there yet, but if they did continue down that path and if it really, there was a groundswell of support to scale the L1, because a lot of change can happen, even just like updating the software and making it more efficient and obviously getting the hardware up to, a reasonably mid-range model from a couple of years ago. It doesn't feel like too much of a stretch. And
a lot can happen, but how, like, they get 2 updates a year, right? Like, so that's where I'm like, they typically Ethereum ships 2 major updates, right? Like, now the next one we're looking at is Pectra, which is probably Q1 2025. All right. So for me, I'm agreeing with you where I'm in alignment with Max. I think they need to reprioritize and make L1 competitive, else you lose all the valuable parts of this stuff. And if they don't, like, if Ethereum, the people that make these decisions do not decide to prioritize the stuff by Pectra or by the next one, now you're looking at what, 2 years until something? And like, what happens in a 2-year time span in blockchain where these things are iterating pretty quickly, and you have a lot of pickups. So question, you guys are talking about like Zeta Markets L2 on Solana. I want to make sure I understand, because I know with ZK compression, which came out through Mert and Helios, like that was a thing. And I know a lot of these L2s are some of these L2s are leveraging that potentially, so that the construction is not identical to the L2 as we know them in the Ethereum landscape. Is that true? Because I just haven't dug into them. I know network extensions has been a little bit of a meme that has come forward in that conversation. Are they technically differentiated from an L2 construction on Ethereum? And what is that difference, if you guys know?
I mean, for sure, ZK compression on the L1, that is a new concept. And actually, I think I heard Justin Drake talking about it on a recent podcast about something that he wants to introduce into Ethereum, and that would be maybe an easy way to scale it without reducing decentralization. So definitely the ZK compression on the L1, even though it was sort of memed on the timeline as, this is capitulation for Solana. No, it is all...
I thought that's stupid. Yeah.
Yeah, it's sort of, a perfect solution where you are able to retain the single state, but you're actually able to, I think, reduce costs for creating accounts and doing things like that by 1000x. So, I mean, it's going to be very powerful. And as far as I understand, you can use that as well on layer 2s, again, within the layer 2 itself. So I'm not sure if they are utilizing that, but that's my high level understanding.
Yeah, I wanted to dig into it more because I think Austin's a smart person, and I think him calling them network extensions implies that there is a technical differentiator there. I did not dig in to see what that actually was, but I have to imagine. I don't know if it uses that ZK compression or if there's another component, but I wanted to dig in more because I know he wouldn't just flippantly throw that out.
Yeah, this is probably a good future episode. I haven't dug super deep into it. I just saw the announcements and things like that. But yeah, no, it's super, super interesting.
Nice. I know, like, this is a throwback to a little bit ago, but you brought it up and I want to make sure I just spit it out. Like, we talked about the moneyness that's inherited by these L2s just by whatever using ETH, and then the fees, which is the other thing. I think the reason there's a lot of consternation between those two things is moneyness is not quantifiable. Fees are very quantifiable. So like, everyone is seeing the thing that is clearly quantifiable is degrading rapidly. And then the thing that is not quantifiable is like the saving grace. So like, it's very hard for people to say, look, my house is on fire, but like, you're telling me good things are on the horizon. And like, I don't have those things in my hand. So it's like bird in the hand, bird in the bush, whatever. I think that's one of the hardest things about the L2 explicit roadmap is they're hoping to have the value gained from being money outpacing the value loss of being deflationary, generating fees, whatever. And there's a lot of debate there.
That's a good point, and I think it's actually, it's not directly related, but it just reminded me. I've been seeing announcements lately for various protocols. I guess you could call the category chain abstraction. I don't really know what the category is supposed to be called. One balance. I don't know. But it seems like this is, maybe it's not even uniquely enabled by ETH, but it's probably a lot easier to do if everyone's using an L2 and they're kind of adhering to the same standards on Ethereum. But I guess the idea is, and I'm going to find this quote, but there's a really good Vitalik quote that kind of sums it up. I saw in one of the announcement threads. But the idea is like, the user eventually won't see what L2 you're on. You have a balance of USDC. You just see 1,000 USDC, and then in the back, back end, it's kind of, some of it's on Arbitrum, some's on Blast, some of it is on Base, some of it is actually mainnet ETH, and you want to do an action, and there's some system of, it's an intent-based system, which that's another kind of a buzzword that's been thrown around for over a year now, but I don't know, I guess the tech works at this point, and it figures out how to do all those kind of intermediary steps, and then the end result is you've abstracted away all of this mess of L2s and the fragmentation. What is your view on this? I mean, this has been talked about for a while. It seems like we're a little bit closer now to that being in production. Is that going to save ETH? Is that going to make it all feel like an
want
L1?
some sauce on this? I literally turned down an offer today to tweet about that shit because like it was just like literally today about like, and I put the tool and it did exactly what you said. Like it's a single, they call it the magic account, right? Like you send your ETH, it spins up a smart account on several L2s and it abstracts away underlying. So I turned it down for two reasons. One, because like fatigue, frankly, it's just like another, like a layer, like it reminds me like the aggregators of aggregators start coming out, and then the aggregators that aggregate the aggregations start coming out, and like, oh, like this is the layer at which it goes away, but now we're gonna have two teams release magic accounts, and then I'm gonna be the aggregator of magic accounts. So now now the L2s are underneath my 17 magic accounts that pays to me, and I'm the 15th standard to replace the 14 standards before me. Introduces a 16th standard, right? That kind of shit. So that humans just do it on repeat. I had it in my previous career. So that was one. One is fatigue. And the second thing is that I find the abstract, because like the common argument is like, oh, no one knows if your website uses Azure versus AWS, right? Of course, we're going to abstract away this shit. And for me, I have a problem with that because we're building a system that's fundamentally built on security and sovereign ownership of your assets, right? So how do you transplant that same abstraction wherever you're opting into risks, a bunch of different risks in all these different protocols for something that you are supposedly owning, and not go through the education rabbit hole of all that stuff? It's the exact same thing that happens whenever you have like a MetaMask extension with 55 networks, right? Everyone's like, we're just going to continue to add networks, and it should be on the wallet to be opinionated on the 5 that it shows or whatever, and not give the option. And it's like, well, now you're playing Kingmaker, right? You have these wallets that show like, oh, these are the good guys, these are the bad guys, and they're making who's good and who's bad. And then like you can't even give any optionality to users without giving, because they're like, what am I choosing on, right? Oh, well, you're choosing based on their consensus. I'm like, oh, well, what the fuck is consensus? And they're like, oh, well, you see, you need consensus, and then it's actually a layer 2 versus whatever. So like, I find like you can't, if you abstract away literally everything, then you're opting your users into risk. Maybe that's good. We're starting to see a lot more opinionated stuff, like taking some meme coin stuff. We're seeing, what was it? Moonshot came out. They don't even say anything. It's like, give us $50. We show that you have $50. We don't actually tell you it's Solana on the background that does a meme coin thing or whatever. And they're curating their list of meme coins. It's like, I think we do need some of that, but I think if we're going to talk about like the entirety of the chain for all use cases, I don't subscribe to that as like a good path, or something that resonates with me at least.
You can't abstract away all of the trust implications. I think a better equivalent is like, you do know who you store your money with. You know if it's with HSBC or if it's with your local tin pot bank that will go bust whenever there's a downturn, or whether you store it with your mate Bobby with a drug addiction. Like, you do care where you're storing that money. And I think that's almost like a better analogy. And the other thing I would say is, if this is bullish for ETH, then I ask you, who is going to be paying for ETH DA when it's all abstracted away, and you don't even realize you're going to the least secure L2 in the hemisphere because it's using the cheapest DA.
Because they're cheapest, possible. Right? Yeah.
So it's just going to route to whoever can do the cheapest, and who can do the cheapest? Probably the guy who's doing the most insecure DA, you would imagine. So, how does that work? And then how is Justin Drake then saying that there'll be 10 million TPS all using ETH DA? I just don't understand how he can reconcile that.
Alignment, Dave. Alignment. Teams will opt to do it because it's good for Ethereum, which I think some will, but I think the majority won't.
what I think will happen with this paradigm, because we're clearly marching towards it on the ETH side. People are going to try to build this, and then what's going to happen is there's going to be some wallet that has like 100 chains on it, and someone is going to make a fork on Optimism or whatever that is specifically designed to scam people, where they'll like airdrop some money in the chain. It gets added as a network to your wallet, and then on the back end they'll trick it to like, you know, send, oh, you just need some gas or whatever, I don't know, and then it'll just move money around and it gets locked in there. You see this already with Solana meme coins and spam tokens, right? They get sent with, you know, false market caps, and you try to like swap it or whatever. And I don't know. I feel like there's just, you're just increasing the surface area to have a bad user experience or to get attacked or to get scammed. And so what's actually going to happen is people like developers and people that run these startups, they're just going to decide that we're only going to support Base and Arbitrum and some power law, to your point, L2s that we know has battle-tested code and norms and, you know, robust vendors to kind of control for this risk. And we're just going to ignore the rest and consider them spam chains. And so I just don't see how this doesn't become power law over time, is I guess my point.
Yeah. And that's where it becomes, because like I can subscribe to the idea that people will continue to spin up in L2s just because, just like they did NFT projects, right? People are throwing out. We're starting to get to the point where NFTs are basically not launching at all. Like you still have some, but whatever. So like, I think we'll have a similar arc. Big ones launch, they capture the majority of mind share, and then it's going to wean off. And then the next question goes, okay, if we are going to continue to see power law, everything's going to go to the dominant players. Let's say we have, you know, 3 to 5 that capture it all. Mega ETH, Base, Arbitrum. We'll throw Blast in there, even though Dave hates them. And then Optimism. Just and so like, okay, we have those. Mega ETH is explicitly like, if all of those chains, then, and this is the kicker, if all of those chains absorb all of the transactions, because Ethereum is not scaling its data availability, there is a literal cap on how much data they can consume. So let's say all of those chains are using Ethereum, and because all of the transactions are going there, because all the users are going there, at some point, they will literally have to move DA off to an alt DA system, right? Mega ETH specifically cannot launch with Ethereum because the throughput is so high that Ethereum could not consume the amount of data. They have to work with Eigenlayer, and Eigenlayer specifically is coding to make sure that they can meet the capacity that Mega ETH can do. Base is trying to scale up.
Zen Llama said the other week that that EigenDA isn't enough for Mega ETH. So even EigenDA is not enough.
So yeah, they weren't. I think it was on the Empire pod last week. Bing Hapatao Bing was talking that like there's old spec that's out there that yes, at that level it can't. They actually have a team dedicated to them from Eigenlayer that is specifically being built out to make sure that they can meet the capacity that Mega ETH can do. So like yeah, even then it's like pushing the upper bounds of what Eigenlayer can do. But same argument, right? It's like now let's assume Base they have this march of pushing their gas as high as they can over the next whatever, 1 every week, 2 every week, 4 every week. They said Jesse said he'll scale it up. At some point, it'll hit a level to where ETH can't support it unless ETH continues to boost its DA level, which is already at 0, right? It's at 0. So like, yes, they might consume it for a little bit. They may get a little bit of fees, but eventually basically like, well, Ethereum's not going to be able to support us long term. Might as well switch now because like, why pay the extra money? So like, then they'll have to switch because in a year when they're doing 1 gigagas of throughput and have a gajillion transactions, they literally can't use ETH. Might as well just move that time up forward a little bit, save themselves some money, make their system more sustainable, make it cheaper for end users. Like there's just a lot of incentives there to say like, yeah, you know, okay, you know, we don't want to not use Ethereum, but like, you know, Ethereum can't keep up. We're the good guys right here. We're trying to keep it cheap for you dudes. We gotta do what we got to do for you guys because we have a relationship with the users to make sure that you guys are having your costs go down, not Ethereum, which, you know, they say they're aligned with Ethereum. Oh man, there's so much there. I like one other thing, like they'll talk about the like, oh, don't worry, Base doesn't have an onus, like they're capturing a lot of fees. Eventually they'll decentralize and like then they'll do whatever. Well, you know how you decentralize? You introduce a token. You have to like, so then, okay, now there's a layer of like Base is capturing so much value that we want them to decentralize. So, okay, they decentralize, which means they have to introduce a token, which means now that, again, there's a buffer between everything that's going on that's bullish, which is Base, and Ethereum, which is the underlying asset. So like, even the bull case is like, Base is fucking awesome. We want them to decentralize. Cool, they decentralize. Now they just inserted a thing that is literally like not additive to Ethereum, right? People are gonna want to express their bullishness through that. Yeah, there's a lot.
Also, is there not a
Yeah.
chance if you've got like a seriously dominant L2, wouldn't they just try to in-house the DA themselves, try to spin off their own DA arm,
They could
create their own project, and then bring that income in as well? I mean, it's almost eigen DA, to bring the money back to ETH, as far as I understand. So, that to me would be the pretty, and then suddenly it's going to be like, right, we're providing our own DA, we're providing our own execution, but we're settling on ETH, whose asset has been down only for years and years and years. And obviously this is like the bear case, things could turn around, but at what point do they then sever ties and then just become their own L1, which is what many argue.
I mean, that's absolutely, I don't know. I feel like that definitely would happen, especially with Base, right? They're making money. Everyone's happy. They're going to just one day decide to in-house the DA, and they'll bury it in some changelog on a Coinbase engineering blog. No one's even going to notice. How are you going to notice? You can't even tell.
So I will push back on L2s becoming L1s because I think it's so fucking profitable to be an L2. Like, it's such a great business model. Like, if you can capture it, it's like, why, the progress going from L2 to L1 is like, okay, I have to spin up a validator set. I have to like probably start a new token, right? Because they already have a token that is governance. So like, okay, I have to command a validator set. I have to then either have a second token, or I have to find a way to like scrape back the token that I've already started issuing and then like give that to validators. And like, or I can just sit here and kind of meme the ETH thing and then like maximally get everything and throw a few shekels back to ETH. Like the profit margins I came out with a thing before Denkun, profit margins were in like 40 to 60 range based on like the fees that they generated versus what they paid back to ETH. Now they're all over 90%. So like, when you're making 99% margins on top of ETH and claim security and you get access to liquidity, like, I don't know, man.
Yeah, I think the nomenclature is less important. I think functionally, that is a world where they're effectively an L1, even though they're not technically an L1. They are doing the job that L1 does, which is recruit devs, apps are getting built, and they are kind of extracting all the rent.
I looked at it, by the way. So like the other component of paying back to Ethereum mainnet. So like a Ethereum blocks can get up to 30 million gas. So cut it in half because that's the actual target, 15 million. So you would need 700 roughly basis transactions that they post down. The proof itself is 21,000 gas. And that means nothing to basically everyone. But just know that means it's so fucking small that the literal minimum you have to pay for an Ethereum block is 21,000. So the proof is so small, they have to pay the exact minimum. And they post every, I think it's like 7 blocks. So if you want ETH to be deflationary based on just the proof alone, assuming they lose the DA stuff because the throughput is so high, you need like 700 of those per block to just hit the target, which is like half a block. So if there's no users on mainnet and you're just relying on these L2s to post basically nothing down to mainnet, and their throughput gets so high that they have offload their DA, like it's a long road to hoe is what I'm trying to say for some of these guys.
I think in terms of the L2s not wanting to become an L1, there's maybe a slight catch-22 because there is obviously a premium for being an L1. And also you only really have to look at L2 tokens to see how they've performed against the big L1s. So there is a premium there. It could be a monetary premium. We're not really sure what it is. If it is a monetary premium, then Ethereum should be big and should be worth a lot of money and should offer a lot of security. And then that should encourage something like Base to go off and spin off and be their own because you want the monetary premium yourself. If there isn't any monetary premium associated with just being an L1 token, well then ETH isn't going to do well, I think, long term. And therefore it will reduce its security and be less appealing for Base to be using it as an settlement layer anyway. So yeah, my view is there is going to be a premium. It's probably always going to be there. And I think for the cost of just spinning up a brand new token and then start issuing it, I think they would be tempted personally.
Yeah, I do think it'll be tempted. I just don't think it'll be as prevalent as a lot of people claim it. Like everyone's just like, oh, these things are going to get so big, they're going to spin off. I think some will for sure. Like it's just every option is going to be taken by all these things. So it will happen. I just don't think it'll be a super big, appealing, often occurring thing.
Is there anything? So this has been a good topic. I think I'm learning a lot about like the L2 landscape and kind of that roadmap. You're in an interesting position though, because you say all this, which I think a lot of it is valid criticism of L2s, or at least of kind of whether they actually will help ETH out from a price action standpoint. But at the same time, it seems like you are more aligned with the EVM ETH side. That like why aren't you? Are you giga bullish Solana? Like, what is your view on the
I got a
opposite
shit ton
end
of
of the spectrum?
Solana, dude. I got a bunch over there. So like I'm fascinated with this thing just because there's a lot of elements to it, right? There's like a lot of vectors in a lot of different directions, and it's kind of fun game to like try to evaluate and guess where it's going to go. So like it's got me nerd sniped because of that. There's just a lot going on. I'm constantly trying to evaluate my biases I might have on the ecosystem, and like where value accrues, how it accrues, how do you scale these systems, whatever. I do think the winning strategy is to scale the L1, continue to scale the L1, and then scale it further until like you sufficiently meet your, like, without sacrificing your values, right? For Ethereum, it's maximal decentralization. Solana, it's not that, it's user experience and like, really trying to get NASDAQ on chain, like that whole thing. Awesome. Cool. I think, so to predict where value goes, I think, or to say the best course for that, I think it's scale it to your sufficient level and then allow for these other systems to come in and contribute to your ecosystem however they want. You're seeing it on Solana, right? Solana's scaling at its pace, trying to scale further. But even in that paradigm, you have Zeta Markets, you have Grass, you have all these other things that are like talking about L2s on Solana, which is fine. But Solana is saying like, that's cool. It's additive. You guys are doing your niche thing, but we have the single state dominion, and we're going to continue to do that. So users stay there, they transact. It's a good experience, and they have a thing to look forward in the past to say that like, I don't need to move my home because I can see a future here. And like, that's that as a byproduct, like Solana's token price is going up, even though like you don't need Solana for gas, right? It's so cheap. Like I don't need a shit ton of Solana to do that, but I want to express bullishness on the Solana ecosystem because I believe in that vision. Therefore, I buy the Solana token. So, and just like this whole paradigm of value and abundance, like that's a whole thing that I've been really trying to reflect on over the last like year and a half, because I think, again, a lot of the ecosystem values artificial scarcity. We did it with NFT collections. We did it with 21 billion cap. We did it like everything needs to be deflationary or minimal so that inherently makes it valuable, which is not true, right? There's plenty of things that are low number that no one gives a shit about because they don't give a shit about it. So it's a combination of those things. So I would say I participate in the ETH ecosystem because it's fascinating to see this stuff roll out and trying to predict how, like, what is value? Like how do you capture value? What, like, in this full stack of this ecosystem that we're building, what is the most valuable thing? Like, we're starting to cut that stuff up. I like asking those questions, that kind of like philosophical stuff. And those questions are kind of answered on Solana, right? It's like, I don't have to ask those questions because it's all one big fucking box. Like, I get it all right here. So like, and I'm bullish on that. Therefore, I have Solana to express that. And then, yeah, so I'm in the Ethereum discourse because I'm so familiar with it and because I think it's fascinating. I think both are going to be just fine over the next several years. And I have my portfolio allocation expresses that.
I think talking about the end state, where these blockchains are going to head, I think it's going to look something like Cosmos, except rather than building out the sort of interoperability layer and all the apps that are tying in to the central hub, instead the focus should be what Solana is doing, of just create this enormous central hub, very decentralized, but also with incredibly high throughput. And then you just have loads and loads of app chains, hopefully with an interoperable layer between them. Just feeding off of that. And that's where I kind of think both Ethereum and Cosmos sort of got it wrong. And, these path dependency is important.
I'm going to make a graphic and credit you for the thought. Because you visualizing it, right? Like I did this way back in the past of, this had been a year and a half ago. And it was very similar to modular monolithic when that whole fake debate was going on. When it was just like, yeah, Cosmos, same thing, vectors everywhere, right? Like Atom is the hub, but no one really gives a shit about it because there's no structural tie from all this stuff going on to hub. therefore it dies. Ethereum is very similar, but like, yeah, it's got this artificial cap that it's imposed on itself of like trying to scale. And now it's starting to lose the edges to everything and like values accruing out there. But you're right. Solana, it was like, I had it pictured as a giant ball with just little nodules on it all around it, as opposed to like this hub and spoke module. And when you do that, like, yeah, it's very easy to capture value inside the hub, because that's where the majority of the stuff happens. And then you have niche things around it. I'm going to bring that forward. I'm going to tag you. Maybe get them numbers up.
Nice. Some creative brainstorming.
Yeah.
What are your views just generally on where we're at with the market? You know, a lot of things have cooled off this past summer. Meme coins have cooled off significantly. Volumes on chains like Solana are down significantly from like July. And obviously price action is, kind of just meh. Where do you think things land in the next 6 months into probably early next year? Do you think we're primed for a run here, or?
I think there's a lot of uncertainty with the election, obviously. Like, I've heard it go all the way from like, it doesn't matter who gets elected, both of them are up because they're going to print money, and cryptocurrencies are kind of seen as a value prop to the debasement. So there's that, and to like, it's a coin flip and depends on who gets elected. If it's Trump, it's to the moon. If it's Kamala, it's and then probably still up because of debasement, but who knows? To be honest, like, I'm not much of a trader. It's hard for me to express to people like how unfocused I am on, or how much brain space dollars, like the cost of the currencies takes up in my day to day. Like, it's just hard for me to care. I wish I cared more, frankly. I wish I traded. I feel like I'd be good at the game if I cared about the game. I care about nerd fights on the internet for whatever reason. It's like, that's where I put my energy. I just know that the industry itself, like the global demand for block space is only going to go up. Now, whether it goes in Ethereum or goes in Solana or goes in Bitcoin or whatever, like TBD. But I think there's enough global demand for block space because it is superior in a bunch of different ways. Maybe not on the user facing side, but at least on the stablecoin and back end side for a lot of these corporations, that they will adopt it. I think that's just a fact. And because I have that vision, I'm comfy just like holding the majors and kind of going up. I'll dabble in meme coins because that's what I do. That's what everyone does. You throw some shekels out there to have some fun with occasionally. But most of my positions have been ossified for 6 to 12 months. Like, I haven't touched anything. I've been reading, building, making API requests to fucking DeFi Llama. Like, that's where my game. It's going to go up into the right. I don't need to exit in the next 2 months, so I don't really care.
I do think vibes are very bad though at the moment, and it's just like bottom of the bear market, isn't it? Where it's really hard to imagine how we can actually get out of it. But I saw an interesting take today where basically the Twitter has sort of devolved into this just sprawl of politics and fights and sports, and it's about 1 in 10 tweets is actually crypto related, even though I only follow crypto people, and that's maybe been happening over the last 6 months. And you do wonder how much that's attributable to just this sort of barren crypto landscape, because it's just so hard to actually communicate with each other all of a sudden.
Yeah, the algo goes sideways sometimes, huh? Like, I noticed it recently too. Like, you get random stuff coming your way. I try to ignore it. You train it by like just trying to bypass it, not spend too much time looking at it, whatever, mute it, whatever you can. And then I'll just keep spewing my own crypto stuff into the ether to help everyone else out. But you're like, yeah, like, kind of boring. We've been on the meme coin meta for too long. I think everyone's kind of exhausted from it, frankly.
Yeah.
So waiting for some kind of innovation, or we just chop down until election does stuff and everyone can reignite it. But it's only going to take 1 or 2 stories. Like, you just need something interesting to come forward, or some big bullish news, or some major fund to say, like, Russia's buying fucking Bitcoin and 100 million a clip, whatever, and everyone's gonna start getting excited again. That's just how we are. We're reactional like that.
It's weird how, in a lot of ways, this summer reminds me of last summer. I mean, obviously, a lot of things have changed, but for some reason, the timing just lines up with peak bearishness. And then, I think exactly a year ago, we did an episode with a friend of mine on just like, when is this going to reverse? And it reversed within like 2 months of that. With late fall, breakpoint, and then everything ripped into their new year. Who knows?
You guys going to breakpoint
again? Yeah, I'll be around.
Sick. Yeah, maybe I can meet you. I'm doing a Klano lunch, and then I think probably the Klano event.
Sweet. Oh, I didn't know you were a Klano guy.
I'm a whale. Yeah, I'm in Klano capital.
Oh wow, I got rugged on the airdrop for Saga people.
No, yeah, those are
Yeah,
pretty decent.
but yeah, I think maybe we'll follow that pattern again. It seems like the election, especially being timed in November, that once again might be a catalyst point that'll carry in through the holidays into early next year. But who knows?
Yeah, I mean, there's green shoots in the industry, right? Polymarket's having a lot of success. Yes, I know a lot of that stuff is based on the election itself, but like between that and then like you're having a lot of these fun, like the ETFs were launched, we're starting to see a little bit of adoption there. Yes, outflows have been gross the last few days, but like we have that there, right? It's this huge, massive thing that we've been looking forward to for 10, 15 years that has exposure to the remainder of traditional capital. And like now that's there, we have that on ramp should things happen. So now we just need a catalyst to see if those inflows can come in through that thing, which I think they will. So between that, consumer apps, whatever, we're having some good times. I think there are green shoots in the industry. Like we're seeing stable coins, like the entire country of Georgia is using apparently Tron to like handle a bunch of shit. So like I heard that was through he's on the Unchained podcast, the cryptography guy. Oh man, I can't believe I forgot his name. But he was there and he's like, yeah, like I had to go download the app and like actually like buy stuff at the gas station in Tron USDT because that's just what they all use over there. It's a bunch of Russian expats that are over there and doing whatever. So like, yeah, there's green shoots. Just trying not to let the noise get to you and all the everyone chewing at each other's legs because they lost 20 grand on a meme coin or whatever.
I think Bitcoin definitely is going to have some green shoots and is like sort of guaranteed to go up over the next year. And I think the alts, just as we've sort of been seeing for the last year, it's going to depend which ones you're in, because there could be some huge consumer, well, just one application really, but it's going to depend which chain it's on to see how your bags perform. So, buyer beware, and maybe we need to get some Bitcoin exposure. God forbid.
It's so hard for me to buy Bitcoin. I just can't do it. Like I know it's the easy one. It's the left curve, like gold, whatever. But I'm so pilled on the like, dude. You need programmability for people to give a shit, and it's so ossified. And then you have the jeopardy of the security budget going to zero. Like it's going to get flipped by a smart contract platform, whether that's Ethereum or Solana or some Gen 3, 4, 5 that we don't even know what's out yet. It's coming down. So I just can't sit comfy in it. I don't have the conviction there.
Really? Even after the ordinal stuff essentially solving the security budget issues?
It didn't though. It was promising. It did, but it didn't. No one uses the fucking things anymore. And like,
yeah, volumes are down, but should they come back? I don't know. It feels like there's at least an avenue where there is.
For sure. I thought my percentages were under 1% before because it was just nothing and everyone was whatever. Dude, I'm like, show me the math. Like, how does it work? Like right now, literally everyone's hope in the current paradigm, or at least especially pre-ordinals, was that the law of thermodynamics, and you're gonna have nation states step in to mine out of their own pocket to make sure that the thing stays up and running and secure, so that they don't jeopardize the money that they've already invested in Bitcoin, which is fucking retarded. Sorry, but like now, like the thing that you think is awesome and is maximally decentralized because you have miners all over the world is already getting centralized because you have these giant server farms running, like mining this shit. And then your hope, once the budget goes to zero and all of these very large institutional players are getting out because it's no longer profitable, because that's what they're going to do. Your hope is that entire nations, and only entire nations, are going to step in to run the thing out of their own pocket to prop up the money that they already invested inside of Bitcoin. That doesn't make any sense. These are living systems. They need fees. You need fees to sustain a decentralized network. And if you lose that and you don't have fees from ordinals because it's not programmable, you don't have fees from actual transactions because doesn't have the capacity to do fucking anything, where's the fees going to come from? Not going to happen. It's hard for me.
It could be a timing thing though. Like, yes, in 40 years, it may go kaput, although I do think it would probably get overtaken sooner than that, I think. But
I say within 5 to 7.
Interesting. I mean, that feels very soon to me. 5 years. I mean, that's basically the next bull run. If we're in the same cycle, I really struggle to.
Let's
to
open
see
a
it,
market then on Polymarket and
yeah,
make this official. Yeah, I don't think Bitcoin's going anywhere. I mean, it's just, here's the thing. Talk to anyone on the street. That's the only crypto they know. They barely know Ethereum. I mean, it's just,
Mm.
it's too hard to get over that network effect of and mind share.
But they
Can't kill
need
it.
fees. You
Yeah.
need fees.
you are correct. But there is between now and then. I know it's going to be coming down pretty fast, but they can have ingenuity. They're trying to get this OP-cat thing through to make it a bit more
True.
programmable for L2s. We shall see.
Mhm.
But I think this cycle has given sort of renewed hope that they can come up with ways to make fees. Because I think originally it was supposed to be payments, and therefore there'd be lots of people paying transactions. But now it's just the big custodians store it, and then it gets traded on a centralized exchange. So you're not having transactions
fees,
for all
yep.
the different transactions. So yeah, I don't think that route will work. So they do need to come up with something. I do agree, but I think it's a very strong meme, and I think you could hold it for 10 years, and it could still go kaput
The
in
strongest
20,
of
30,
memes.
40.
Yeah.
It is damn strong.
Yeah. I just, for me, and like I'm being a little hyperbolic with some of this stuff. I think it'll have some issues, and I'm hopeful for it. It's just, for me, I don't know that the gains that I would make there, like, I'm much more confident Solana is going to go up and it's going to make more. So like,
That's a fair point.
like,
Yeah.
like, why would I allocate there if I'm have that same level of confidence or more in Solana going up more than whatever? I don't know.
So you don't believe Michael Saylor when he says it's going to 3.9 million or whatever it was?
Yeah, man. But like, yeah, if you actually, they literally need that. If they're not going to capture fees, they need the price to appreciate so rapidly that it needs to accelerate basically the entire GDP of America to like be sustainable or not get attacked. And like, that just seems, that's a big bet.
But you mentioned debasement earlier. I think if anything can do it, it's BTC. So I don't know. I think it'll be fun
until it can't. I'm in Samani's camp. Like, we were butting heads on the L2 parasitic thing, but I'm in the. I don't agree that Bitcoin is a special child. I think it ultimately gets wrecked. Time horizon's kind of tough to guess, but I'm thinking 5 to 7 years it gets flipped, and then beyond that, there's a big security issue, and it gets attacked and spirals down to zero.
Let's set up the prediction market.
Wow.
I'm definitely taking the other side.
Bold claim coming from a crypto insider, but I like it. Keeps things interesting. Well, Brett, thank you so much for jumping on. This has been a super fun combo. I think we'll do more of these with you in the future, and looking forward to, well, I guess you're going to make a chart now based on combo with Dave we had earlier. So
yeah, I want to do that. Yeah. I'll whip it up. It'll take me 20 minutes. I'm getting really good at this Excalidraw shit.
Oh, nice. Awesome. Well, appreciate you, and we'll be looking forward to future combos.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, guys.